come once again to discuss things.
Okay. Hello, boilers and coolers. It's your old pal Scythe Part 2 here. Joining me today is a ghost for fun. Man, if people listen to this for like ASMR, we are just like the worst channel for that. Yeah, so we're here to conclude Horror Month's character discussions with a discussion on zombies, because I just credited Alfie for following the rules better, but he cheated.
Wow.
Because he's a dirty cheater.
I just follow in your footsteps.
Oh, so it's all my fault. Take some goddamn responsibility for stuff, Alfie.
I need great power first.
Yeah, fair enough. So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about a fad that seems to have never died out, but in recent years, a lot of people do seem to be more sick of it, which I think is maybe what it needs to have another comeback with the kind of energy it did in the mid to just basically all of the 2000s, honestly. And that is zombies.
Mm-hmm. So zombies as a character, as a monster, is really interesting to me because there are so many varieties of zombies, and like the like narrative purpose of them shifts so drastically when you really get right down to it, all zombie movies are exactly the same goddamn thing. To the point where I even have a joke that I go to, which is, alright, Alfie, where's the safest place to go in a zombie apocalypse?
Not the supermarket.
That's fair. The correct answer is the coma ward of a hospital.
Oh.
Because they all the like survivors of the zombie apocalypse protags, they just wake up from a coma in the hospital and they're fine. And really, when you think about it, it should be like fucking buffet line for the zombies, but I guess it's not. It's always weird to me that like that trope is so consistent. Walking Dead, 28 Days Later, Resident Evil. It's all over the place. So zombie movies all seem to basically have, the same plot. They tend to be more character focused things, with the same kind of plot dressing. But like the role of zombies shifts drastically between things, because sometimes they're just cannon fodder. Sometimes they're like these really twisted versions of people, and it's like it's very emotionally taxing for our heroes to deal with them, because they're dealing with people, sometimes people that they knew and cared about. The Walking Dead's first season has that really great episode where the guy's trying to just pick off zombies with a sniper rifle, and there's his dead wife walking around, and he can't do it to her, So it's just interesting how the role of the zombie changes film to film, or series or whatever.
Yeah, and I feel that's the strength. Out of nearly every other horror monster, zombies are one of the few that were really defined by film. Obviously zombies have been kind of a myth that have been existing for a while in human history, but it's very different from how, let's say, George Romero popularized it, in terms of like they were more just people who were hypnotized or following another, and they were called zombies, like walking like a mindless zombie kind of thing, not necessarily correlating to the undead, or even more modern adaptations, the infected. Like, they don't even have to have a supernatural element. There's more a disease pantheon kind of fear to it. So there's so many different interpretations of what they are, what they can do, their capabilities, sometimes you get that with vampires, but I don't think it's to the same extent because normally a vampire you can have more extremes in certain cases, but they normally do follow the same basic rule set. With zombies, like even you go for the rule of, oh, you shoot it in the head to kill it. Sometimes not even that's not the case. Sometimes it's just whatever the writer wants to do, judges for the story they want to tell, dictates what the zombies will be. So if you want them to be this overwhelming societal crushing force, I think the best answer to that is like the 28 days later zombies, where holy crap, if that happened, we'd all be fucked. Running zombies is the most terrifying thing to me because Jesus. Like, it's already, horror has that thing of like, oh, you're getting chased by the slow moving thing, and that's got its own kind of sense of dread to it. Like, no matter where you go, you still can't escape it. But I don't know, man. Something running faster than me at me is just infinitely more terrifying because I don't have that many options for that.
Yeah, man. You're no JoJo. You don't have, strong muscular legs that will help you run away from the fight. No, that's a very good point. The running zombie was an interesting twist on the tradition of the monster in an interesting way. That certainly did some stuff. My biggest problem with the running zombie is that is when they became more just cannon fodder, where any personality was essentially removed from them. And it does seem that, like, what a lot of people have drifted toward, because it's the case with 28 Days Later, and it's also the case with The Walking Dead, excuse me, is the zombies don't create the drama. The zombies are just like the ever-present threat that makes people create the drama. Like, again, 28 Days Later, you spend a good chunk of that movie just in a military camp where this crazy guy is in charge of everything, and he's like got one of his former soldiers tied up, and he wants to see how long it takes it to starve to death. And all that stuff, and it's like it's intriguing, and it creates this very kind of opportunistic situation for the prepared but the morally bankrupt to take over, and so the zombies just in that case will kind of fall to a background role, which is interesting.
And I guess that's something where, I don't know, because, pardon the pun, zombies don't really have that much meat on their bones. As antagonists, as villains, sure, you get more. Sometimes the zombies will have like certain personalities, or you have to pick out one particular zombie in a group that seems to have a bit more of its like intelligence left. But they're never normally gonna be your Freddy Kruegers or anything of that sort. That zombies as their own as personalities will never carry a film as like the villain, I feel, because you go too far into that and you do kind of lose the unique aspect of them compared to other things, which is the horde, the almost hive mind of you can take one down but you're never going to take down all of them kind of thing. And when you go away from that and you do start giving them more personality to make them more akin to more typical horror villain, I do think you lose what makes them unique in the fact that yes, they can be the overwhelming threat, unlike say another slasher villain, or even something is like cosmic and crazy we've talked about with like the Overlook Hotel. That's normally always defined to like one location or one town. Zombies being able to be worldwide horror, I do feel like makes the cannon fodder aspect of it that you mentioned more justifiable, because you get to tell stories you can only really ever tell that story like kaiju or something like Cthulhu, where once they get out you're fucked. But other than that, and I guess maybe like Alien Invasion, zombies still have that more unique spin to them than the others, I feel, because it is a very...
Well, because anyone can turn at any moment,
yeah, exactly.
Too, right?
It's very... You're still dealing with mankind. You're still dealing with mankind's problems. Whatever caused the zombies isn't necessarily going to be, oh, if you kill that thing, now the zombies will go back to normal. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, there's no phantom menacing
Yeah,
zombies.
yeah, exactly. Once they happen, you're stuck with them for basically forever. Even happy ending zombie movies are normally about, okay, now we just learn how to live with this.
Yeah, and I mean, like, again, 28 Days Later is... I'm not a huge fan of zombie movies, so people will have to forgive me for pulling the same example, or same movies and shows up over and over again, but, like, 28 Days Later kind of creates the interesting premise of, well, zombies are still human bodies, so they're decaying and they have to eat, so they're going to eventually starve to death. If people can just hold up, the planet cannot sustain the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of intriguing because, like, yeah, eventually some zombies will, like, of course, find, you know, farms and stuff and eat the animals there or whatever, but eventually they're going to die out. And that was kind of an interesting premise, and even the 28 Days is one of the few franchises that actually kind of has legs in horror, where it's enough of a world building movie that you can legitimately get some interesting stuff out of going back to that world. So that's a good example of, like, how things can go wrong, and seriously, they get to the point where, oh, it looks like everything's fine again, and then there's just, like, the one person who is immune, and it kind of starts the whole thing all over again. So that was intriguing. That was kind of a cool thing to play with. But yeah, you're right. Zombie movies usually don't get a happy ending. They just get, like, a okay, and, you know, fucking I Am Legend. They find the town where people have been able to rebuild society, and it's like a small town, and that's the best they could do. There's your happy ending. Shit movie, but hey, what can you do? Yeah, that's a good point. They do create, you know, interesting circumstances because they go hand in hand with the destruction of the entire society. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, it's one thing where I feel like, I guess, just to get your opinion on it, do you feel like societal horror is something we should play with more, and zombies seem to be the primary forefront of that, and I guess alien invasions as well, because we go very for personal fears a lot of the time, and sometimes, like, a community of fears, like we talked about in the previous episode with Manos, like just like bigotism and all that kind of things being played up. But the ideas of, like, worldwide crisis as horror, and how do we survive in that sense, and how does that, like, almost like the Watchmen example of, like, does that bring people together as, like, a unified front, or does that end up causing already strenuous boundaries to just completely collapse? And that's the scary part. I think that's something that interests me a lot, and I'm curious to see where you stand on that as more of a horror guy.
You know, like, the idea of social contract just completely breaking down. I think Hobbes would fucking love zombie movies. Like, that idea of, like, the destruction of the social contract, and, you know, suddenly it becoming, you know, survival of the fittest, the weak, you know, are weeded out, it's all just the strong, and so, you know, you got stuff like Walking Dead, where it's just, it doesn't matter if you're a good person, you don't have to be accountable to anyone if you're just the meanest son of a bitch in the world, right? And that's how you get, like, your Negan and stuff. He's just a fucking psycho, but he's really good at just not giving a fuck about people, and so that allows him to just run shit, and he's just very almost pragmatic in that way. And that's, again, something I heard someone say once that kind of made me have a little bit more respect for The Walking Dead than I had previously was, the show was fine and stuff when it was all zombies and dealing with that, but I had to stop watching when it became people hurting other people. And I was like, man, that's actually really, really good, because that is the scary thing. A quote in regard to horror that I've always heard and it has kind of stuck with me is, I don't care how big or scary or mean your monster is, nothing's going to be scarier than a person. And I kind of, like, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I definitely see where that's coming from. And I think that hits on what you're talking about with, like, the societal collapse and all that stuff is, that's just scary because, like, I mean, fuck, man, I weigh, like, 115 pounds and I got no muscle to speak of. I'm pretty goddamn dependent on being able to trade on my wits and cleverness and whatnot. And that's just yeah, that's probably not going to help me very much if suddenly fucking, oh yeah, I can 3D model, I can edit videos. Well, that's great. What do I do once the fucking, power grid goes down? Shit. There is something scary to that. There is something, horrifying there. Though I don't know how much really explores the collapse of society, because so much of what I see with zombie stuff, it's like just before when it's starting to get really bad, or it's after it's already collapsed. There's very few things that seem to focus on the process of collapse. I think that's kind of what's going on in, like, World War Z, but I haven't watched that movie because it looked really shit.
Yeah, so you got right on the name. So the movie does the beginning part. The novel is exactly what you want. It's really fucking good. It's just diary entries from across the world over, like, 20 years, going individual each key event of what happened when, like, how basically the first starts off in, like, China, and the Chinese government doesn't want it to get out, so they completely suppress it, but that lets that country get overrun because no one else knows what's going on there. So that's already one down. And then through, like, the organ trade, the black market organ trade, it ends up getting over to other countries, and then shit gets bad. But then they make, like, a cure and they fight back. The cure's not an actual cure, it's a placebo. And so it's just to make people feel safer. So then people get, like, figuring that out and, like, okay, don't worry, we're making safe camps. Go here and the military will have to protect you. Except not all the safe camps are safe camps. Most of them are bait to protect the real safe camps, where the zombies get sent to those to survive the survivors while they make a counterattack. It's so in-depth and honestly terrifying at how real a lot of it feels. I'm like, yeah, I can totally imagine that shit going down. There's a thing with the Battle of New York, where they have to go, not the Avengers, that'd be an awesome book there, but they have to go to New York to try and reclaim it, and they send in the first squad, and they treat it like a war, and they get completely overrun and fucking killed. So the next time, they make a plan where, okay, everyone has to stay back to back in a circle and cover each other when they reload, and we'll move in like a turtle fashion, so no one's going to be able to break formation, no one's going to be able to get out of that form, and just shoot our way into the middle. And over the course of a month, they actually managed to do that, and they take back New York. And it's like, it goes piece by piece, how things get done, what countries do better, what countries don't, what the steps forward, the steps back, until by the end of it, they've conquered the zombie apocalypse, but the world is, and society is completely fucked and basically different, just because once the scraps are on the table, everyone immediately starts fighting for them. It's so interesting, and one of the reasons why I really hate that movie is completely just generic zombie movie, because that's not what the book is at all. It's super just like, okay, zombies but politics.
Yeah, that's written by Mel Brooks' son, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, it's a really interesting premise there. I think one of my favorite things, because, like, as much as I like the idea of, like, the societal political collapse, the things that I like about zombies are kind of what I was talking about earlier with the, man, this was my best friend, and now he's, like, infected, and I can't do it, I can't pull the trigger. As bad as I Am Legend is, that fucking scene with that dog is, like, really, like, I really like that kind of stuff, because that is, to me, more scary than, like, these huge existential crises things, because I feel like even if you've never experienced it with a family member, I feel like everyone's thought about the, oh man, what if I have to pull the plug situation with a loved one, and, like, zombies are just that fear personified really well when it's done right. And so I really like that. So one of my favorite zombie things that really plays into that one is Blackest Night from DC. That's it's the superhero book, and a lot of people at the time made fun of it because they were calling it like DC Zombies since Marvel Zombies had been really successful, and Marvel Zombies is like pure camp basically. It's got like some pathos to it, but it's like, oh, what if Galactus became a zombie? So it's like pure camp, but like DC's Blackest Night, it's like it starts off with this really great little bit of world building that Jeff Johns did, where he's like, the day Superman died became a national day a global day of mourning, kind of like a sad holiday. But then when he came back, we realized how hypocritical it was to only mourn for one hero when so many have died in battle. And so it became a national day of mourning for all heroes. And you go to like a superhero graveyard kind of thing. It was really, really this cool bit of world building. And that's where like William Hand does the thing and kicks off Blackest Night. And then the whole premise of the Black Lanterns is, of course, they're reanimated corpses whose goal it is to make others feel intense emotions in order to be able to kill them and induct them into the Corps. So like you had this whole thing of the Hawks. The Hawks was a really good scene because Shayera and Carter Hall had this on again, off again, will they, won't they thing going for the longest time. And while they're holed up getting ready to fight off zombies, this is when like she finally feels something back for him. And then bam, the Black Lantern's like, emotions detected, and just rip their fucking hearts out. It's such a brutal thing, but it's got so much of that going on for it, where it's like it's using their friends and their family, and it's very, and it's not mindless. They're incredibly manipulative. But one of my favorite scenes in it is you got the whole Justice League around fighting, and they're all actually doing a really good job of breaking through the ranks and stuff. And they're trying, and the Black Lanterns are trying everything they can to get at them, and nothing's really working. And then Necron comes up and he's like, or William Hand or Necron, one of them, goes, Bruce Wayne, rise. And like Batman's reanimated because he was dead at the time. And just everybody on the League stops and looks at Batman's corpse, and they're like, Bruce. And they're all immediately compromised. Because it's just such like a, oh man, he was the greatest of us kind of moment. And they're all just, like, I love that kind of thing, of just really that intense emotion of the loved one that you've lost kind of thing. That's really interesting. And it's something I don't feel is played with enough in zombie stuff for me. I don't tend to care for the cannon fodder thing. Though, to be fair, the other thing I really like is 28 Days Later, and that is pretty much just pure cannon fodder zombies. So, I don't know. I guess I can go to either extreme of it, but I don't like a lot of the stuff in the middle.
I guess that makes sense. It's an aspect that I feel is definitely part of the reason why, when they are done well, they can be more than just the social thing. They can have a real emotional core for, like, I think zombies are one of the best trial by fire horror movie villains, because they're of a level of strength and level of threat where they can be flexible to fit any character, any person of any capability, depending on what zombies you go for them with, what weapon they have. You can buy that character being able to survive and go on a journey, or at least learn a lesson about themselves when they're put in a situation they're not in. I think a very good example of that, even though it's a comedy, is Shaun of the Dead. Is because of that world and those level of threat, Shaun's able to learn a lesson, grow as a person in the same way he wouldn't have been able to do if it was like Jason Voorhees coming after him. Like, it's one of those things where it's a great way to have that catharsis of not just going through the fodder and becoming more independent and learning that, but when you are faced with what's normally in the films like the ultimate hurdle, is this is where shit got real, is this is when you're faced with someone you have to kill, and it's someone you know or someone you loved, and that's when they suddenly don't just become the video game mentality. Oh, I'm just enjoying this because I'm going to go kill, and you're reminding, oh, these are people, and now I have to face that reality. And I think it's a really good way of making how gory and violent zombie films can be grounded, in a sense where, as long as the characters have that moment when they do feel, oh, this is someone we know, it reminds you of like the stakes of it, because it's very easy to get lost in the enjoyment of just like the zombie kills and the creativity of all of that. And one thing I really like doing, and I'm gonna have to reread all of this one day, but just from going through it now and again until all the way to the ending, I'm very glad. I think it's one of probably the best zombie work is the Walking Dead comic that recently ended, and I thought it was just a beautifully done run. One that I was very glad to see a creator get to actually just do that whole saga uninterrupted, which is a rarity in comics. And that really does focus even more than the show, because the show does have some good moments where, like you meant, like in season 2, like when the little girl walks out of the barn and everyone was just fucking heartbroken because they spent all this time looking for her, having that hope, and she was there the whole time and she's a zombie and they have to put her down. Or that thing where like Andrew Lincoln has a really great performance where like he finds out his wife's dead and he just breaks down and like everything just goes. So that's good in the TV show, but in the comic there's such a sense of you don't get a chance to mourn, because you have to immediately start, like, these characters get to the point where I guess I don't want to spoil this actually, because I feel like a lot of people actually haven't read the ending of The Walking Dead and everything, so I won't go that far. But there are a lot of times where characters will be in a room with someone and they'll just die, and they'll have said their goodbyes and everything, and they need a moment to collect themselves, be it a couple of hours even, and your brain immediately has to go, when you're in that world for so long, okay, now I've got to make sure they're dead. Like, and you can't imagine being in that situation where you've just seen the person die, and then you have to immediately think about, well, I've got to chop their head off, or I've got to put a bullet in their brain again, kind of thing, to make sure they don't come and eat me. Like, that's just so fucked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having that also juxtapose the thing when you make a villain who is like a human in the zombie world. Like Negan's a really good example. The Governor's a good example. In 28 Days Later, Eccleston's character in that is a really good example of the people who have no sense of the humanity of the zombies. The people who just don't give a fuck because they don't even care about the humans. So like the Governor having like fish tanks of zombie heads that are still alive because their brains are intact, and he's just watching them in TV sets because it's entertainment, because these zombies are like looking around and he's just mesmerized by them. Like, that's so fun, but that's a really good visual, and that's something where you also just have to imagine, oh yes, that's a zombie, but oh, that's a human corpse head. Like, there's almost like a distance between a corpse and a zombie, because sometimes one's more like, a corpse is generally more horrifying than seeing a zombie sometimes, but I guess it's just about like the tone and how it's played, and I think that's interesting.
No, I can agree with that. It's interesting to see what people do with it, because I think the advantage zombies have is they're a lot more malleable. Like vampires, you can do other stuff with them, but it's usually not as successful. Vampires were popularized, not created, but popularized with Dracula as a pretty distinct sexual metaphor. And so to try to do other stuff with them, it's like, you can do your, 30 Days of Night, or your fucking, what's the one where it's Daybreak or something like that, where like vampires have succeeded in taking over the world.
I think I remember that film. I don't know the name.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty sure it's Goyer. Like, you can do other stuff with it, but it's not as like stand out-ish. It doesn't feel as natural. It's like I don't think either of those movies are iconic vampire movies. Whereas like the stuff that does the play with the sexual imagery of vampires is the stuff you remember. Interview with a Vampire, for example. So like that's I don't know. It's just that's pretty much got only the one road you can go down. Frankenstein's only got like one or two roads you can go down. Werewolves only got a couple roads you can go down. Zombies can pretty much fit into any story and any tone, which is really nice. Like you can do really comedic zombie movies. You can do really like intensely dramatic ones. You can really play the gambit with it, whereas other things probably don't fit as well. Like I imagine it's probably happened, but for the life of me, I can't imagine a good, like, Frankenstein comedy. Besides Young Frankenstein. How did I walk into that? That was... I'm an idiot. Never mind. Young Frankenstein's hilarious. I can't imagine two good Frankenstein comedies. Yeah, there we go. Like, that's... I don't know, it's just... It's a weird thought to try to, like... The zombie comedies, it just works so well because they can go to such camp. So I think they're a much more versatile monster than a lot of other things.
And they do seem to be one. We mentioned it earlier, and I do think, given the context of the channel and all the projects we do, we should mention it. But for some reason, they do seem to be remarkably popular and effective against superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel Zombies is entirely camp, but there are moments in that where you're just like, damn, that kind of does fit the characters. And for like Marvel specifically, Marvel's all about the assholes who become heroes, the people who have got a fundamental flaw, but they need to overcome that to become like the heroes. Like it's the default for like Bruce Banner, Tony Stark, Peter Parker. The idea of them actually being flesh-eating monsters as that fatal flaw, and then they have to try and overcome that to like save themselves or like save humanity while still being heroes. That's like a cool exaggeration, and like it's funny, and yeah, it's that you get some goofy moments. But I like that idea for fitting with Marvel, where they just completely lose, but then they still find a way to win. Because I think that fits Marvel more. Whereas with DC, Blackest Night is ultimately a very hopeful story, despite all the tragedy that goes through it. And even the current deceased, it's more so the heroes really trying everything they can to stop the zombie apocalypse, and they get knocked down but they keep coming back up, rather than everyone immediately loses kind of thing, which Marvel starts us up. Which, like, again, Peter Parker eating Mary Jane and Aunt May, and then every time he eats again, he remembers he did that, so then he goes on like a Spider-Man like sorrowful monologue. Is like the most perfect zombie version of Spider-Man ever, where he's just like, brains, eat something, oh god, Aunt May, Mary Jane. Like, it's just such a Spider-Man a zombie, he's still a bitch.
Man, if we ever make Marvel Zombies the movie, I really hope they get Tobey Maguire back for Spider-Man, because I think he'd do that so well.
Yeah, oh my god, you have to get Sam.
Just imagine like fucking like brains like falling out of his open mouth as Tobey Maguire cries in the Spider-Man costume, but he's also a zombie, like got the makeup on. There'd be so much going on. It'd be so good.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Alright, well, why don't we go on to recommendations and just recommend some of our favorite zombie stuff. Why don't you go first?
As I said earlier, it's finally complete. You can run the whole run now, back to front, and you can get a fantastic, really emotional, really gory, really crazy, really creative saga of The Walking Dead. It's the definitive way to go through that story. No idea what the TV show is doing at this point. I turned off long ago. But the book remains fantastic quality all the way out. So definitely look to, if you were holding off on going that before, now that it's done, hopefully that feels more like digestible. So you don't have to worry about catching up anytime. You do it at your own pace. And then I do think the current deceased is interesting for just something to pick up that's modern. DC heroes dealing with zombies. And it's quite creative. Tom Taylor's got a good voice, and he knows how to write bleak DC without sacrificing the characters. Like, if he can do Injustice well, Zombies is less bleak than that, if you ask me. So there's that. In terms of just pure zombie stuff, I definitely feel like the original Night of the Living Dead is still really watchable, and if you do want to like know more about zombies and want to do your own zombie stories, I think it's like mandatory watching because it's that's one of the ideas of dealing with like social problems of the time with like the protagonists of that film and being able to do that in a film during that time, while still just being an entertaining film. And then going on from that, 28 Days Later, the movie, and just the World War Z book.
Man, you got like a lot of zombie recommendations. Okay. Um, I'll pull a more obscure comic. I recommended this to Alfie forever ago, and he read it, and then like I never reread it around that time, so we never really talked about it. But Ra's al Ghul Year One is it's such a strange thing, but like there's this 2 issue like mini that came out in the mid 2000s, and it's like Ra's al Ghul's goodbye letter to Batman because Batman has finally succeeded in destroying all the Lazarus pits, and Ra's is like, okay, good move, that was a brilliant strategy, except you don't know what you're fucking with. There's a reason they exist. Zombie apocalypse, bitch. Deal with that. And it's a really cool thing. It also goes into like Ra's al Ghul's origin, but it's just like a middle finger to Batman and how Batman has to deal with the zombie apocalypse because of Ra's al Ghul, and not like people like infected, but like literally dead crawling out of graves. Classic zombie imagery. Also would recommend Blackest Night, though I still hate the ending of Blackest Night. The story itself is good. The end kind of sucks. Mogo gets one of his best moments ever during the Green Lantern Corps book of Blackest Night, so that's cool. And then you already said it, but I'll just compound on it. 28 Weeks Later, sure. 28 Days Later is great. 28 Weeks Later, I think, is an interesting follow-up and worked really well. So, there you go.
There you have it. Oh, wait, completely forgot the thing I said last week. Did you find a zombie kill you really like?
Oh, shit. I didn't look, because I don't do research or plan these, and I hardly remember them before we start recording half the time. Let's see, your favorite zombie kill. I saw a clip from The Walking Dead where someone lit one on fire, which always seemed like, yeah, that'd be the best thing because, you can't attack someone without arms or legs. You just fucking torso sitting there. If you burn it all up, it's just as effective, and it might kill off others in the process. And then, like, that turned out to not work really well at all, and it kind of created just absolute fucking chaos. So I was like, okay, fine, respect. I was wrong.
Did you just get zombies, but also on fire? How did you think that would be a good idea?
Well, like, it's, if you got a place where you could hole up that's fire resistant, they're going to run out. They're going to eventually, like, everything's going to burn up. It's like the logic of, like, fighting skeletons isn't scary. They have no muscle mass. You can just push them over. There's a timer to it, I admit, but I'm just saying, fire represented way to kill zombies. You gotta have it as a better plan than I think they had in Walking Dead.
Fair enough.
That's what I got.
One of my favorites is another from Walking Dead, and it's a moment that's just kind of improved by just the absurdity of it. But it's where Rick's on the ground and a zombie falls on top of him like a corpse he killed, and another one like dog piles him on to try and get him, so then he shoots that one in the head, and then another one hears that shot and he's still under 2 zombie corpses, so then it jumps down and is trying to bite him through the other 2, and he can't get a good angle to shoot on him because he's got 2 zombie corpses on top of him, so he puts the gun in the second zombie corpse mouth and then fires like 4 times to break through its skull and then hit the one above it.
That's pretty good. Other good zombie kills. I mean, Dead Alive or Left 4 Dead 4 or whatever it's called. the fucking guy just walks into a room full of zombies and he's got the lawnmower and he just holds it up and fucking bum rushes through all of them. That's pretty good stuff too. Though that's again much more comedic. And then there's the priest that kicks ass for the Lord, and he does kung fu against zombies, and that was pretty good too. Okay. You know, it's funny. So I wasn't sure what we're going to talk about as we transition into History Month. And then I remembered, as we were about to record, I remembered a tweet that I saw just like the other day. And it's a take that I think is really wrong, but I think it'll serve as a great transition from Horror Month to History Month. And so we're going to talk about the Mummy. Because someone's got the hot take that mummies are just zombies and they're fucking wrong. So we're going to talk about the monster of the Mummy.
Sound good to me.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. See you then. Until next time. I'm Scythepot 2.
And I'm a ghost of fun.
And we are your ghouly gentlemen. And we will be dissecting things.